Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, how Emmanuel Macron's leadership is changing France.
The fact that he was saying that he was neither from the left nor from the right is not true. He's been from the right from the very beginning.
Critics say he's become an authoritarian president. But is that a new thing? I'm Natasha del Toro, and this is The Take. It's been 2 months since France held an unexpected snap parliamentary election.
France faces potential political paralysis after none of the alliances won an absolute majority of 289 seats needed to form a government on Sunday.
Now, the way it usually works is this. The people vote, one party wins, and then the president appoints a prime minister. There's this unwritten rule that the prime minister they choose is a candidate from the party that won, which in this case would be the left-wing coalition. But Macron rejected the left-wing coalition's candidate and appointed a new prime minister. And that person is not someone from the left.
France finally has a new prime minister, Michel Barnier. A conservative politician and former French minister, Barnier is best known for his role as the EU's Brexit negotiator.
Last weekend, the French took to the streets to protest this nomination.
Left-wing parties are accusing Macron of ignoring the results of the recent legislative elections.
Rokhaya Diallo is no stranger to all of this. She's a journalist, filmmaker, and commentator, widely recognized for her work promoting race, gender, and religious equality.
I'm currently in Paris.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're really excited to speak with you about everything that's going on in France right now. So, Rokhaya, Michel Barnier is a member of the right-wing party. The left has been saying that there's a crisis of the regime and that this is a stolen election.
L'élection a donc été volée.
We've heard a lot about stolen elections in the US, not so much in France. So, what's the mood in the country right now?
I think that many people are disappointed because what is sure is that when they voted in June, they expected change. Michel Barnier belongs to the right. He's been minister in several different governments and he's been in the public eye for 50 years. So even before Emmanuel Macron was born. So he's a betrayal to what people expressed when they voted in June. And I think that many people feel like their vote doesn't count because they wanted change.
Despite the left having the largest group, Emmanuel Macron rejected their prime minister candidate, Lucie Castet, and has continued consultations to come up with an alternative.
And so just to give a little bit of context for our listeners, Lucie Castet is a 37-year-old senior civil servant. She has a strong track record of defending public services. And she was also the candidate of the broad left-wing electoral alliance called the New Popular Front that came in first in this election. But Macron, on August 26, he rejected her in the name of, quote, institutional stability.
So the fact that he never considered to listen to the left, and the fact that he chose Barnier, he was also trying to get someone that would be approved by the far right. So Macron seems to be more eager to listen to the far right than to accept the result of the votes. It's not up to the president to decide whether the parliament accepts or not to vote for what the left would have to propose. He's the president. He's not part of the legislative power. So to me, it's even an infringement of the separations of powers.
So was Macron's appointment of Michel Barnier then maybe a nod to Marine Le Pen?
Definitely. It's notorious. Like several other options from the right have been rejected before, from the right and for the left, because Marine Le Pen said that her far-right party would block them. And it's like she's the one actually deciding who can be a prime minister. And it's not something that is even hidden. She said that publicly. And Macron doesn't hide the fact that he had to consult her to make sure that she would not block the option that he has chosen.
Has anything like this ever happened in France before?
Never. It has never happened. It's very new. It's very new. And especially given the fact that she's been rejected twice. Emmanuel Macron did bad in both the European and the parliamentary elections. So people's will is clear. They don't want to have anything to do with Emmanuel Macron.
When you thought he couldn't get any more unpopular, then this happens. And this has really changed his standing in the French public's view. Now, Macron has repeatedly singled out the France Unbowed Party, which is left-wing. It's the strongest member of the left-wing coalition.
That's very interesting because during the parliamentary elections, the motto was to block the far right. So the parties organized in order to build what they call a Republican blockade against the far right. The agreement was to vote for anyone but the far right. And it was an agreement between the left, but also Macron's party. So many of the elected officials actually from his party benefited from that agreement. And once they have won, suddenly the left, and especially its party, the France Unbowed, was no longer respectable. So they labeled them radical, they labeled them, terrorist apologists. It's very offensive, given the fact that they are the ones who benefited the most from that blockade. So it's a trick. It's a trick to disqualify the left and to make sure that the public opinion don't really trust them.
Now, a few months ago when Macron called for this snap election, it really stunned people in France, even around the world, but in France, some of his closest members of his cabinet did not expect him to do this. What was his gamble?
There are two options. Either he was thinking that he could win, that he could build a stronger majority from his party, which would be him being in a strong denial, or he was thinking that the far right would win. They would then have a prime minister and they would govern France for 3 years and be so unpopular at the end of the 3 years that they would not be able to win the presidential election in 2027. So that was a gamble over our lives because having a government from the far right means very negative things to many people, racial minorities, women, LGBTQIA people, migrants, foreigners. It's just putting many of us in danger. And that didn't bother him to just gamble over our heads.
So what I'm understanding with everything you're saying is that Macron is not serving the will of the people, of the voters. What he is serving is his own political will and his own ambitions. Is that right?
Yes, many people don't feel served by Emmanuel Macron. We've had major social uprising very, very quickly after his election. The year after, we've had the social movement of the yellow vests.
Turning now to Paris, where police have again been firing tear gas and water cannon as yellow vest protesters ignited fires and ransacked shops.
That lasted months from people, all across France who didn't feel that they could access to a decent way of life.
They're angry with French President Emmanuel Macron and his policies. Protesters accuse him of forgetting about ordinary people and instead favoring France's elites.
And the protest against the reform of the pension system was also a strong refusal of Macron's policy. So it doesn't serve those people who were so angry and who are in the street. He serves his own political agenda, his political vision that is not shared by most of the people here.
So what will be Macron's political legacy? That's after the break. So, Rokhaya, when Macron was sworn in as president of France in May 2017, the mood was celebratory.
A new leader in charge of France, Emmanuel Macron, was inaugurated as president. He immediately launched his mission to shake up French politics, world economics, and the European Union. Macron is the first French president that does not come from the country's two mainstream parties.
People had a lot of hope. He had resoundingly beaten Marine Le Pen. Maybe you could tell us, what did the French public see in him at the time?
He was a new face in a time of wider and wider distrust towards the political traditional parties. So I think that people wanted something new. He created his own party from scratch, a party that pretended to be neither from the right nor from the left. So it was something, and he was new, he was young. He published a book called Revolution, and you know what revolution means to us French people. So they saw someone who would change their lives and who would dismantle the old traditional parties and offer something new to them. But he was from the system. He was from the system.
In a recent piece that you wrote for The Guardian, you said that Macron is becoming an authoritarian president. And I know when he was campaigning, it was kind of different. He presented sort of a more warm, approachable character. And now I've heard him being described as Jupiter-like.
Yes, actually, Emmanuel Macron labeled himself Jupiter in reference to the Roman god who has everything revolving around him. So from the very beginning, he told us who he was. And he wanted to have a very strong presidential regime and making the prime minister being more a kind of collaborator than the real head of the government. And that's why he didn't want to pick the prime minister from the left. He wanted to make sure that he had someone who would just follow his agenda to make France become the startup nation.
Meaning both a nation that works with and for the startups, but also a nation that thinks and moves like a startup.
He has used the services of consulting companies like McKinsey. He didn't think that people in the public service had the skill to understand how they function. He preferred to use and to spend millions. He's been from the right from the very beginning. He's pushed from very conservative measures that I would label Islamophobic, very authoritarian, pro-security, restricting the freedoms of building an organization, of observing your religion as a Muslim. It's something that, you know, is very right-wing. Like his party in the National Assembly pushed a law on immigration, which is the toughest ever, and which was changed in order to fit to the far-right demands.
Now, Le Monde published an article in June titled, "People Hate You." It was a quote from an MP who used to belong to Macron's own party, and his approval ratings are absolutely abysmal. I mean, it was only 25% approval in July.
I think it's because of the measures we spoke about, but also because of his attitude.
Right. And so, Rokhaya, how has France changed under Macron?
I think it has never been so divided. People are divided in a way that I've never seen before. It's unprecedented. The far right has never been so strong because he has conceded to them so many policies. People distrust politicians in a way that is also unprecedented. And the fact that Macron, can get over the head of the voters and appoint whoever he wants to is not helping. So I think that many people are angry. They feel like they're not heard. There are daily problems. The fact that they need to pay the bills at the end of the month is not really taken into account.
Now, Macron is set to rule France until 2027, when the next presidential election is held. What do you think lies ahead? What can we expect from him in the future?
That will be very difficult because the prime minister still doesn't belong to a majority. So the challenge will be to have a stable government, which is not likely to happen for a long time. There is no way for the president to call on snap election before 1 year after the previous ones. And if he called on snap election next year, it may bring the far right. I don't know. We've seen so many things that we had never seen before this year that I can't really tell what will happen.
So this is a time of major unrest, major uncertainty in France as you all look to the future. Rokhaya, thank you so much for coming here and explaining to us what's going on in France. We're all watching, as you all are as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Marcos Bartolome and Ashish Malhotra, with Shraddha Joshi, Hagir Saleh, Duha Mosaad, and me, Natasha Del Toro, in for Malika Bilal. Amy Walters edited this episode. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Joe Plourde mixed this episode. Alexandra Locke is the Take's executive producer, and Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.